When the body had been burnt, all the bones were collected with great care and washed in wine. The purple cloth was spread over the bottom of the chest, which would have formed part of the treasure of the royal household, and the bones were carefully laid out in order. First, the feet, then the trunk, and at the top, the skull, which they covered with the purple cloth. Above this, they placed the gold wreath, then sealed the chest inside the marble sarcophagus, which had also been constructed with utmost haste. Lastly, in front of this, they placed the wooden couch, and around it, the weapons and the other objects. Closing the heavy marble doors of the chamber, they allowed the wedge which would seal it forever. And then, after opening the sarcophagus, we saw something I could never possibly have imagined. A solid gold chest with an impressive relief star on its lid. We lifted it out of the sarcophagus, placed it on the floor, and opened it. Our eyes nearly popped out of our heads, and we caught our breath. All the signs were that we had found a royal tomb, and if the dating we had assigned to the objects was correct, as it seemed to be, then I did not even dare to think about it. For the first time, I felt a shiver run down my spine, as if an electric shock had passed through me. If the dating, and if these were royal remains, then had I held the bones of Philip in my hands? It was astounding, too much for my mind to take in.
Η παρουσίαση της μακράς ιστορικής της διαδρομής και του σημαντικού της ρόλου, που είναι αναγκαία και χρήσιμη, ρίχνει φως στο γεγονός ότι η Μακεδονία, στην ονομαζόμενη Ελληνιστική εποχή, που διήρκεσε 3 αιώνες, αρχίζοντας με τον Αλέξανδρο και τελειώνοντας με την Κλεοπάτρα, επηρέασε τον τρόπο σκέψης του ανθρώπου, διαμόρφωσε το δυτικό πολιτισμό και έθεσε τα θεμέλια ενός οικουμενικού κόσμου. Συνεπώς, η απανταχού διαχρονική της παρουσία ως κληροδότης του ελληνικού πολιτισμού αποτελεί αηλαμπή φανό της πορείας του ανθρώπου.
And what Angeliki has explained to us, as none of us knew, is that this really is the hill of King Philip's huge palace, and the scale of it transforms the whole history until now of Hellenistic architecture, Hellenistic palace life.
Well, Philip had a great vision. He really materialized the unity of the entire Greek cities, Greek world, because, you know, this was a dream of every Greek. But in spite of the great dream, they waged great wars between themselves. But he was powerful enough to make it true, and he had to fight for it.
We might ask, what did Philip give to the Hellenistic world? Until Angeliki's work, we would have said, particularly me, he gave the greatest Hellenistic man, Alexander. He gave Alexander his army. This is so important. With almost no change, that huge army that conquered Asia all to India is Philip's brilliant creation. Every unit balanced in a new way. We could say also he gave Alexander the settlement of the very difficult interests and disputes and the power of the Greek city-states. This is the framework. He gives Alexander his aim, to conquer as far as Asia. He gives him the campaign program, that we will punish the Persians for the wrongs they have done to the Greeks when they invaded, and we will liberate, we will really free the Greek cities in Asia. And this is what Alexander does. And he does it because of his father.
Une source relative à Alexandre lui-même, à sa vie, à ses conquêtes de premier ordre, qui est l'œuvre d'Arien, l'anabase d'Arien. Et donc, quand on arrive en Asie centrale, comme ça m'est arrivé, je veux dire, en Grèce, on a Pausanias à la main. En Asie centrale, on a l'anabase d'Arien à la main. Et notamment, les savants soviétiques, russes aujourd'hui, ouzbeks, tadjiks, etc., s'intéresse directement au cheminement d'Alexandre, et il vient de paraître toute une suite de travaux qui essayent de retrouver la localisation d'épisodes célèbres dans cette histoire d'Alexandre. Se passe l'épisode évidemment célèbre du mariage avec Roxane. Comment ne pas l'évoquer ici, au milieu de cette salle de sculpture hellénistique qui n'existerait pas si Alexandre n'avait pas existé.
Alexander bequeathed conquest, the shape of the kingdoms, the idea of great new cities founded, including, Mustafa knows better than me, the great Alexandria.
Yes.
70
Alexanders, they talk about 70 Alexanders.
Well, you may want to cut them down, but you cannot get below 15.
No.
That is enough for
one man. Yes. and other cities, I mean cities like Seleucia, Pamia.
He changed the idea of Hellenism from being political into a cultural concept.
And people before him, I mean, like Alexander I, that is mentioned, also Herodotus mentioned about Alexander, who's saying that I am of Greek, saying himself, I'm of Greek descent. He says, he states this himself. And why is it that Archelos, for example, invites Euripides? Why is it then Philip invites Aristotle? I mean, their cultural concern is very great.
L'essentiel, est-ce la mise en contact de la culture grecque avec une série de cultures différentes qui existaient le long de son chemin, depuis la Méditerranée jusqu'à l'Indus. Mais en quoi cette rencontre est différente des rencontres précédentes qui existaient? Parce que quand même les Grecs ne vivaient pas en vase clos, ils connaissaient l'Égypte, ils connaissaient l'Asie mineure certainement, et les royaumes qui ont précédé le royaume achéménide, et puis ils avaient une connaissance sans doute jusqu'à la Mésopotamie, sinon au-delà de l'Asie. Et il y avait des contacts, il y avait des gens qui voyageaient, il y avait des ambassades, il y avait des artistes, même et des artisans, qui ont sans doute travaillé, même jusqu'à Persépolis éventuellement. Mais en quoi la conquête d'Alexandre a produit un changement, dirions-nous, qualitatif de ces échanges?
La culture grecque, la civilisation grecque avait déjà pénétré en bien des endroits de l'Orient, mais après Alexandre, c'est la civilisation dominante. Parce que c'est la civilisation des gens qui ont le pouvoir. C'est la civilisation des rois. Les rois macédoniens apportent avec eux la civilisation grecque. C'est leur culture, c'est leur civilisation. Et, eh bien, c'est la langue dominante et c'est la culture dominante. Si on voulait monter dans la société, en Orient après Alexandre, il fallait apprendre le grec et s'helléniser. C'était la culture, c'était le moyen de promotion sociale dans cet univers hellénistique. Il fallait savoir le grec, il fallait s'helléniser d'une façon ou d'une autre. Sinon, on pouvait très bien continuer à vivre, mais on ne montait plus, parce qu'en haut, il y avait les Grecs, les Gréco-Macédoniens.
C'est un point très important que tu viens de faire, Georges. Et il vaudra la peine, tout à l'heure, de voir concrètement certains domaines où la culture grecque a influencé les populations indigènes, et aussi d'autres domaines où cela s'est fait dans le sens inverse, où les Grecs ont adopté, ont été influencés par les cultures locales.
Greek became a universal language. This never experienced before.
It was a lingua franca.
You know, of three continents, of parts of three continents, Europe, Asia and Africa.
Coming to the language itself, was it of Dorian origin?
The Macedonian Greek is a form of Greek. This is very complex. People think there are perhaps two strands, one Doric and one more northwestern Greek coming through up from Thessaly, perhaps over the back of the mountains where we are sitting. But there is no question that the Macedonians, the Macedonian kings, spoke Greek.
There was a dialect. But when in Arian, for example, he describes that many times Alexander addressed the Macedonians in their language, and not in the Attica Greek.
Yes.
And this, many people try to misinterpret it, that it wasn't Greek. Like, for example, we can go at this very moment to Crete, and I will not understand, I will not be able to follow the language. But it was undoubtedly Greek. And it wasn't only that the upper class consisted of Greeks, but even the soldiers and the simple people were of Greek origin.
We have the evidence for this here.
Yes.
We have found more than 70 inscriptions on gravestones of common Macedonian citizens of 4th and 5th century BC, and we have a lot of beautiful names like Amadokos, Tyrion, Drikalos, Krino, Perskestas, Alkestas, such beautiful names.
From excavations, recent excavations undertaken by Jean-Yves Empereur, and he reached the level of the very early foundations of the city, and he showed it was on a pebble mosaic of a Macedonian pattern. Therefore, sitting here, the prototype of a Macedonian palace, I could visualize the royal palace's area in Alexandria, emulating the palace of Philip, who started the Hellenistic world, as we said. The Ptolemies in general did not have a policy of Hellenizing Egyptians. But Ptolemy I, in particular, in person, he had the idea of reconciling the two main elements of his population.
He was influenced to the degree that he wanted to imitate the pharaohs. He wanted to be. He wanted to be himself a pharaoh.
A pharaoh, a son of God. A son of God. Ptolemy I had this both spiritual and cultural unity of the elite, I would say, of both Egyptians and Greeks.
That's why he worked with Dimitris Phalereos.